please join me in welcoming the Honorable Steve Adler and the Honorable Ivy Taylor. Ma'am, thank you so much. Good to have you. Mr. Mayor, nice to see you. Thank you. Mayors, welcome. So nice to have you here.
It's good to be here.
Thank you.
You know, as I recollect what I said to you, I called you up and I said, Evan, I'm thinking about running for mayor. And there was silence on the other end of the phone, which is not usually what happens.
Never happens, no. Not for a day.
And after the silence, you said, push pins in my eyes.
Right.
Why?
I'd rather push pins in my eyeballs than be mayor of the city. Well, that's true, actually, but you decided to do it. Let's determine if that was a good decision or a bad one. I want to not get into the weeds with matters that are exclusively about your respective city. We're not going to talk about a pothole on Palmer Lane or a light out in Shavana Park or something like that, Mayor. We're going to talk about issues that are actually statewide issues that affect all the big cities, but really migrate down to the city level and that you all have to deal with every day. The biggest issue, arguably, at the legislature this session, the one that they advertised going in the door was going to be the focus of their attention, was infrastructure investment, by which they meant transportation. They ended some diversions and found some new sources of revenue for roads, and it's, you know, $4 or $5 billion. It'll maybe be a little bit more than that before all is said and done on transportation. Fast-growing state. Don't know if it's enough money. Are you all going to feel the effects of the transportation investment, Mayor Taylor, that the legislature put into place? Is it enough? Is it going to solve the problems you have in San Antonio?
Well, I think we'll certainly feel the effects where we welcome any investment in transportation, but we certainly can't just rely on the state in order to address transportation. I know
they will love to hear that.
I know you don't want to get in the weeds on San Antonio specific issues, but we are in the middle of a planning process, and we're developing a multimodal transportation plan, and so the state funding and investment is just one piece of the puzzle. I think there are many other things that we can do within our community that will affect our outcomes in relation to accessibility and mobility.
Right, but of course you come into San Antonio and leave San Antonio largely, not exclusively, but largely through the charming I-35 corridor. And one imagines that improvements to I-35 would be welcomed in San Antonio, and really that's not something that you're all going to be able to engineer yourselves. You're going to need money from in partnership with the state for that to happen.
Yes, we certainly will, and I'm sure Lone Star Rail is on your list of topics.
Oh, we'll get there, I promise.
Okay. All right, I won't jump the gun.
That's another way there. Mr. Mayor, you turned heads earlier this year when you said, and it turned out to be factually true, although context is always helpful, that Austin is actually more congested these days on the roads than New York. That's actually true. We rank higher on the list of congested cities than New York. Do you think that the work of the legislature, the transportation investment and policy changes they made are going to materially impact this city?
Yes, I mean it's never enough, but it's a lot more than what it was, and we're already seeing the money as it's going to be hopefully pushed through to do a lot of work on I-35, south of 45 and north of 45. So if we're in fact the recipients of those funds, that would make a huge difference on I-35. It would enable us to put in transit lanes so that we can start moving differently in terms of how traffic moves on I-35, but it's not enough. Austin, the questions I think go to land planning issues right now as much as anything else.
Right, and of course the two cities are growing at quite a clip. Austin a little bit faster than San Antonio, but you're both growing. I think since 2010, San Antonio's grown a little bit less than 10%, Austin's grown a little bit more than 13% in population. That's not going to stop anytime soon. You're going to need to come up with more options to get more people around. And Mayor, you alluded to rail, because obviously that's something that we've been talking about for some time. Back before you were mayor and Mayor Adler were mayor, when it was Mayor Castro and Mayor Leffingwell, there was some discussion with the Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Fox, about the possibility of some high-speed rail corridor between the two cities. Do you have anything to report on, any progress on that, any further discussions on some kind of a rail corridor that might alleviate some of the I-35 problems?
Well, the Lone Star Rail discussion is still continuing. I know it's been going on for quite a while. The city of San Antonio is making more substantial financial commitment to it. It's proposed in our budget, which we'll be adopting this coming year, for operating expenses so that they can continue the due diligence necessary to develop out the plan. For us, the big question is what will the operating costs be each year, but then of course the bigger question is the capital cost to actually to build the system.
Right, and who's going to bear, Mayor, those responsibilities? You know, we're having a discussion somewhat north of here, up in Dallas and Fort Worth, though it would impact this part of the state potentially as well, about privately funded rail, so something that would not involve any expenditure of public dollars. Are you advocating for this to be done privately, or would you be willing to see public money go to some kind of a rail solution?
Right now, I'm just advocating for it to be done and to look at all the options related to financing it. I think most of the discussion has been centered around public financing, going to the feds to get the money for the capital investment to start out. But I'd be open to any other discussions if we could get it done. That's a real transportation solution. I think folks in both cities would see that as very useful and would help our region, which is growing. Our cities are growing towards each other, and we have to take a regional approach and strategy.
You know, Mr. Mayor, people would prefer not to pay for anything themselves, and I think one of the reasons that high-speed rail has come back online as a potential issue, although we're not there yet, is because they're being told, well, it's not going to cost you anything. So, you know, it's going to be privately financed. Let those people make money off of it. Let them take the risk. I think there's some question as to whether they will truly take all the risk or whether we may end up with the bill eventually. What's your position on this?
You know, I haven't seen the final financial. But the concept of that is being developed right now that has the high-speed rail going between Houston and Dallas in kind of a V that points toward Austin, so it would have the leg going to the Austin-San Antonio area is obviously real intriguing.
Yeah, we don't have enough people coming here from out of town. That's right. It'd be good to add some more.
Door's always open.
Door's always open. Spoken like a mayor. What about toll roads? You know, Mayor Taylor, there was a move, again, not entirely successful in the legislature during this session to try to get rid of toll roads. Toll road moratorium, we've overtold the state. We're double taxing people by asking them to first pay their taxes, which go to construction of roads, and then secondarily saying to them, well, if you actually want to avoid having to sit in traffic, you're going to have to pay a second time. I think toll roads are more of a fact of life kind of in our universe maybe than in yours, right? You haven't had to battle, certainly not as much as Dallas, say. You're not battling with the toll road question.
We are tackling that issue. I think I heard some hissing when you just said toll road.
Right.
So there's a fair amount of people in San Antonio that have that same reaction when they hear that term. And so we are kind of trying to figure out what's the best approach and if any roads in San Antonio will be tolled and how we should proceed with that. But there is a lot of division in the community on whether or not that's a solution to congestion.
Yeah. Mayor, you know, it's easy to hate toll roads until you have to go to Dallas and you go, oh, I could just take Mopac up to 45 and then over and avoid all that stuff north of the city. That's actually pretty good for like $2, whatever it is. You know, once you go toll, you never go back.
Well, nobody likes tolls. Nobody likes tolls. But at the same time, we're not going to work in a transportation system that has cars on the highway. What I want to have are buses and transit lanes that are going no slower than 45 miles an hour. Yeah. And if you can keep the buses moving that fast, past cars that are stuck in traffic, somebody's going to get out of their car and get in the bus.
Right.
And the only way to ensure that that bus and that transit way can always travel at 45 miles an hour is to have some kind of system that can limit the number of cars that are on that transit lane so they don't muck it up. And quite frankly, the toll system is the only way that's been developed at this point to be able to regulate that traffic flow.
Another way to get cars off the road would be to transition everybody off to some kind of local rail. We had an election last November in which 57% of the citizens, same election in which you were, you know, I mean, you know what happened. The city just doesn't get it yet, or is not buying it yet, or is not embracing it yet. How are you going to persuade the public that there's an importance to this issue? What are you going to do?
I think everybody understands there's an importance to that issue. I don't think that vote was an indication that the issue is not
important.
What
was it about
then?
It's
still the polls.
Bad plan?
Well, I think it was a bad plan. I think that no one really understood how this 9.5-mile segment was going to impact anybody in the northwest or southwest parts of town. It was very expensive. Everybody, I think, was praying for something that they could vote for, and that was not something that they could vote for. And I don't know whether it's rail. I think the focus right now is on the bus rapid transit. I think the focus right now is in putting parks and rides that are at the periphery of congestion and getting people in a quick
Yep.
to be able to get into downtown, then we need a circulator. So I think it was the wrong plan. It was the wrong plan.
It was the wrong plan. I swore I wouldn't get into weeds, Mayor. I just kind of did with our mayor, so I'm going to get slightly down in the weeds on this with you. What's your problem with rideshare? Everybody associates you with hating on Uber or hating on rideshare, which is not an accurate telling of the story, but the perception is out there that somehow you among the mayors are the enemy of rideshare. Okay. Will you disabuse us of that, please?
Let's set the record straight. I don't have a problem with rideshare. We went through some debates in San Antonio about how rideshare could be implemented in our community. I'm proud to report that just a few weeks ago we passed an ordinance that allows Lyft to come back to town and operate during a pilot program through a framework that meets their needs and meets our needs as far as public safety. Really, the linchpin was this issue of the screening of the drivers, what type of background checks. Our council was very focused on ensuring that anyone who's going to be driving has had some adequate background check, and so that's what the debate was about. But we have always welcomed, this was the third ordinance that we passed to allow rideshare in San Antonio.
And so all is well as far as going forward on this.
So we have Lyft. Lyft will be back in business in San Antonio shortly, and we're continuing conversations with Uber, and we hope that they'll be able to be back
optimistic
soon as
about
yes.
that. Let me pivot over to another topic that was on the agenda of legislators this year, and that was guns. As you know, they passed open carry legislation finally in the legislature this time. Texas was one of only 6 states in the country that did not have it. We're about to be however, the state with the largest cities that have open carry, because in other states where large cities have seen open carry laws passed in their state, they've had opt-outs, and there were no opt-outs passed for the big cities in Texas. So Houston, San Antonio, Dallas, Austin are going to be among the largest cities in the country, if not the largest cities in the country, that will have open carry when this goes into effect on January 1st. Mayor, is this going to be a good thing, Mayor Taylor, for San Antonio to have open carry?
Well, no, I don't think open carry is a good thing, but that's my personal opinion. But being that it is the law of the land, we'll have to make sure that we work very closely with all of our law enforcement officials and various organizations to provide training on what to expect in relation to open carry and to try and be prepared for any situations that may arise.
What's the biggest concern you have about open carry taking effect? Just as you think ahead a few months and you have to prepare for, you know, a number of things that quite candidly you can't say are going to happen. But if you have one anxiety about open carry coming into effect in San Antonio, what is it?
Well, it's already a very precarious time in relation to our law enforcement all throughout the nation, and so
eyes of the nation have been on Bexar County in the last couple of days.
Yes,
right.
Yes, they have. And so I think when you have people that are openly carrying their weapons around, that can lead to any situation escalating and being exacerbated very quickly.
You think it's going to make the city more dangerous?
I don't think it'll make it safer.
You don't think it'll make it safer? Mr. Mayor, what do you say about open carry coming to Austin? What concerns do you have about open carry when it's implemented on January 1st?
You know, open carry makes me nervous, and it makes me nervous for the same reasons. I don't think it makes the city any safer, and I think that there's it adds just a potential for uncertainty. I think it does reinforce the need to spend more resources on mental health issues and support, and hopefully we'll do that.
The mayor Mayor Taylor referred to relations with the police and kind of the conversation that we're having all over the state and all over the country, quite honestly, about the relationship that police have with communities. You have recently talked about the importance of body cameras. Would you let us know where your head is on that right now, what you think we need to do on that, and how that will impact this conversation about how police are being regarded by the communities they serve?
I think we need body cameras. I think accountability is real important, and I think body cameras add to that. In our city, our police chief and our officers support the body cameras, and I think it's something that the community wants. It's expensive. The technology is expensive, and the storage of the video is massive. So I think it's something that Austin will, in this budget, start moving toward. We have right now actually a pilot program operating where we have 20 officers on this patrol right now that have body cameras, but not with the most recent technology. The technology that the police chief wanted has just come online, so I see us moving in that direction.
How much is it going to cost the city to get this implemented properly? And it may not happen overnight.
You know, it probably, if you were going to do it now all the way, probably cost about $7 million. We're not going to do that in this budget. But I would see us moving substantially toward that. I would expect an expenditure that was well over $1 million, but probably not over $3 million.
In the first year?
In the first year.
Madam Mayor, what about body cameras in San Antonio?
Sure, yes, we're committed to implementing body camera technology to provide, again, that accountability and that transparency for the public. And so we have $3 million in our proposed budget that will be passing next week. We have $3 million in there for body cameras.
What do you think the overall ticket for you guys is going to be, if not $3 million?
I don't know what the total cost might be.
But you're phasing it in as the same.
Yes.
Speaking of police chiefs, you tried to steal his police chief. All you did was just cost him more money.
Yeah, that worked out pretty well for Chief Acevedo.
Is there anything you want to say to her?
You know, my San Antonio and Austin are growing closer and closer together.
Right.
And some people speculate that over a period of time we become this metropolitan region.
Right, yeah.
And I figure if that happens, that just means that Art Acevedo gets to be police chief of both cities.
Right. Ride share, hell, job share. That's what we actually need. He'd do Austin in the morning and San Antonio in the afternoon, right? We just build rail for him to get back and forth to work. That's it. Let me ask you about poverty in your two cities, income inequality, affordability, that bucket of issues, which certainly are in play at the national level in the 2016 presidential campaign. The last numbers I was able to find for the cities of San Antonio and Austin, roughly 1 in 5 residents is in poverty. Is that about right? Is that the current information that you have? What are you all, as a practical matter, doing about that? And what can you do about that? We hear so much about these big public policy issues, thorny, complicated. Well, that's really a federal thing. We really can't do anything about that at the city level or at the county level or even at the state level. But I wonder if both of you, recognizing that so much of your population is living below the poverty line, what are you doing about it, Mr. Mayor?
It's more than 20%. And, you know, this city council's done 2 things since it came into office in January. The first thing we did was we solved the water problem. We made it rain and we filled up the lakes. Pretty good,
You gonna take credit for the rain? Really?
Right.
What was the old Mark White line was shoot whatever moves, claim whatever falls, is that right? So you're going to claim what fell, that's it.
The second thing that's happened is we have reduced the poverty level in the city since we've taken the office. Of course, that doesn't mean there are any fewer people that live in poverty. We're just exporting our poverty around the cities around us. And what that is doing is it is really bringing home the fact that we have a regional economy here and a regional situation. We have now the opportunity to engage regionally in ways we never have before because the communities around us now also understand that we are joined at the hip in terms of what we do. There's a lot of things that we ought to be doing with respect to affordability in this city. There are 2 things ultimately. You either give people more money to spend or you make things cost less. We're going to be the first council in no one knows how long, no one can ever remember a time when the city council voted to not only reduce tax rates but also reduce taxes. We have to bring in companies.
Well, you've sued the state over appraisals at least, right? I mean,
we've done that too.
That's one thing that you've done as a tangible act.
Right, and we can talk about that later if you want to, but I think that that's an important thing to do. We're also putting together ideas that we've talked about on the campaign in terms of creating a REIT or a strike fund to start acquiring housing stock that over the next 10 years is going to be lost to gentrification so that we can hold it, but with a market model so that it's not being something that's subsidized or dependent on bonds. But it's about housing and it's about jobs in the city.
How about wages? You favor an increase in the minimum wage?
You know, that's not something that a city can do.
I know that, but I asked if you favored it. I didn't say whether you would do it. I asked if you favored it.
What the city can do is with respect to its own wages. And we do have a living wage in the city of Austin, and I suspect that this council is going to extend that living wage not only to permanent employees but also to temporary employees.
Excellent. Mayor Taylor, you came out of the housing universe. You've been living in the affordability conversation for years and years, so you understand this. What are you doing in San Antonio to get around this problem?
Oh, we are doing a lot, and this is the part of the job that really gets me excited. I'm a community development planner, and really what I see as my role as mayor is to figure out how to connect all San Antonians to the opportunity and prosperity that's going on in our city. But there's not just one way that we can do it. So we're focused on workforce development in San Antonio. I've been working with our community college district there, as well as industry leaders, to develop a streamlined system so that people, no matter where they are in relation to their education or professional background, they can go back to school for training or gain the skills and education they need for jobs that are being created every day in San Antonio. We have a lot of businesses that are booming, but they say that we don't have the people to fill the jobs that they're creating.
And why is that? I mean, the unemployment rate, I realize, in Texas is lower than it is in other places. And I understand that it's lower in the country now than it was, say, 7 years ago. But the reality is there are still a lot of people looking for work. Why can't the businesses you're talking about find people to take those jobs?
That's because the people don't have the education and skill
So
sets.
it ties back to other issues.
Right, ties back to other issues. So we're working on a workforce development strategy. Of course, we're always looking to work more closely with the school districts. We're excited. We have a new superintendent in SAISD in San Antonio. And we're working on an intensive place-based redevelopment effort on the east side of San Antonio. And we're hoping that a lot of lessons will be learned from there that we can take to other parts of the city as well.
But let me ask you the same question I asked the mayor. You believe there should be an increase in the minimum wage? Is that going to be a way to solve part of this problem?
I don't think so. Some of my colleagues disagree. We are looking in this budget in increasing our entry wage for city employees to $13 an hour. I'm okay with that because we're able to afford it. But what I think is so much more important is that discussion again about building skills and education levels. We have about 500 city employees that are at the lowest wage who've been in their jobs for an average of 10 to 15 years. I think that points to the fact that we need to make sure they have access to training and education so they can move up into other jobs that would pay better.
Okay, let me move over to another conversation that took place both at the legislature and is happening right as we sit here at the national level, and that is protections and rights for LGBT citizens. I think I got a New York Times alert as I was walking in here this morning that the deputy county clerk in that Kentucky county has started to issue marriage licenses. I think they've hauled that county clerk off to jail now. Last night. There was a lot of discussion after the Supreme Court's ruling a couple of months ago that county clerks in Texas should be permitted to claim religious objections and not issue marriage licenses. That moment seemed to have passed. And in fact, the clerks in both Bexar and Travis County were entirely on board right after the Supreme Court ruling and issued licenses as if nothing had happened. But this is a city issue as well as a state and federal issue because the question of non-discrimination ordinances has come up and what the policies of cities should be. Mr. Mayor, how should cities be legislating tolerance or legislating equality as it relates to the LGBT community? What is Austin doing? What should Austin be doing?
You know, it almost sounds pejorative when you call it that way, legislating equality.
Well, you know, we're in a situation where it's got to be some kind of action taken.
Right, and I think that in the city of Austin, we support and promote equality and opportunity and access in everything that we do.
Right.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I love this city and have always loved this city. And I think we're consistent and have been and will always be.
Right. Mayor Taylor, you have not always been a fan of non-discrimination ordinances in the city of San Antonio. In fact, I believe you cast at least one vote against, I think it was the amended ordinance back when you were on the council. Is that right?
I cast a vote against our non-discrimination ordinance in 2013.
Right, but your position on that, as I understand it as mayor, has been, look, we're going to try to come at this question differently. You promised you would open, and I think as of about a week ago, made a hire for an Office of Diversity for the city of San Antonio. Is that right?
Yes, once the ordinance was passed, became the law of the land, and my job as mayor was to ensure its implementation and execution, and so I've opened an Office of Diversity and Inclusion. I've worked with the city manager on that, and so our goal in San Antonio is to make sure that everyone feels valued and included, and so that's what that office will be working on.
What was your problem with the ordinance as it passed the city? Why'd you oppose it?
I voted against the ordinance. Well, let me take a step back. In 2011, we had an ordinance that provided for domestic partner benefits for city employees, and I cast an affirmative vote for that. But in 2013, the ordinance that was developed and that ultimately passed went beyond just the city organization, and also would impact, or does impact, businesses that may have contracts with the city, and I didn't feel comfortable with that. I thought that we should lead by example, and I didn't think that we should be dictating what businesses might do.
Do you have any concern, as some have had, again, discussion in the presidential campaign, that some people who may object on religious grounds to serving some individuals whose lifestyles they don't agree with, that they should be permitted to have an exemption from doing that? This whole conversation, pastor protection bill that passed in this legislation about not performing marriages. There's a lot of different aspects of this conversation that we're hearing about now. Talk to us about where you come down on that.
Well, I don't think there's enough time to address all of that.
Oh, we have no place to go. Go ahead.
Well, what I'm getting at is that I think there's a lot of gray area, which is why I felt uncomfortable as a council person even debating on this issue, and felt that we could be focusing on issues where we could gain consensus as a city.
Mr. Mayor, do you think that businesses or anybody else should have a problem of providing an equal opportunity to people who come in the door? I mean,
well, I don't know if
the mayor's concerned whether the city has, about the city's place in this conversation. Do you have any concern at all about the city's place in this conversation?
I don't have any concern about the city providing for equality and access everywhere it can in the city.
Yeah, for anybody, this
for
conversation
anybody.
Or any other. Let me ask you about education. Right now we're sitting around waiting for next summer when the Supreme Court's going to come back with a ruling on the state's appeal of the school finance lawsuit. This is kind of an endless cycle that we find ourselves in, where about every 5 or 6 years we decide that the method of funding public education is unconstitutional. We think it is, and come back and come up with another plan, and then we suddenly find ourselves back in court again. What we know for sure is that we still haven't recovered from the 2011 cuts to public education. Staffing levels are still below what they were at the 2011 levels. We know that class sizes are larger than they were at the 2011 levels. Test scores are flat. You obviously can't control what the state does on public education funding or any other issue on public education policy, but it directly impacts your two cities. Mr. Mayor, what should the state be doing on public education that it's not doing, and how will that improve the lives of people in this city?
I think there are two things that the state, I believe, is constitutionally bound to do that it's not doing. One of them is putting more money into education, because I think there's insufficient funds. And then second, I don't have a problem with the law that says that we're going to get money and then distribute it equally. The Robin Hood plan, I think, promotes equity. What I do have a problem with are the weights and measures that are used to redistribute that money. Back when I was in the legislature with Senator Shapley, we were fighting at that point over the measures that were used. So you get an extra premium if you're educating a child that's in poverty. You get an extra weight if you're educating a child that is speaking English as a second language. The measures that were used to fund that were too low in 1997. They were set in 1983. The measures we're using today are the same ones we used in 1997 and we used in 83.
So we're using an old formula, effectively, for a new state.
And we're using one that is patently unfair. So those are the two things.
The state's argument, Mayor, at the Supreme Court the other day was effectively, and I think this may have been a direct or close to a direct quote, money is not pixie dust. If you just simply add more money to public education, you don't necessarily get results out of it. You acknowledge that money is not the only answer? Yes. Yeah? I do. But it helps.
It helps a lot.
It does.
Yes.
Madam Mayor, what do you think about the public education funding conversation that we're having right now, and how would this impact San Antonio, depending upon the ruling of the court?
Of course, it has a big impact. As I just mentioned, one of the challenges that we're having is
workforce development.
Workforce development. So, and that all starts with K through 12 education.
Right.
So I think certainly there are some districts in San Antonio that are underfunded, and money definitely helps. I think also, now I'm not an education policy expert, but as a parent, I observe that there's too much emphasis on the standardized testing, and if there could be more flexibility in relation to that. And so as someone who's been trying to figure out how to revitalize neighborhoods, especially in the inner city where people often make their decisions on where to live based on quality of schools, I've embraced the charter school movement. And we have several high-performing charters that have moved into San Antonio with the help of the Brackenridge Foundation and several other philanthropic donors over the course of the past few years. And so actually I'm going to be visiting a charter school here in Austin after this event.
Yeah.
So I think as many options as we can provide to parents, the better.
Yeah. You said K through 12. The reality is that in a lot of ways it starts before K, and San Antonio, again, back when you were on the council, before you were mayor, yes, passed a slight increase in the sales tax to fund pre-K, full day, yes, for 20,000 plus, I think it was 4-year-olds. Is that right?
Yes,
in the
we
city,
have
this
a
is
program.
pre-K for SA.
Yes.
You've actually said that you thought pre-K for SA could be a model replicated elsewhere in the state, and in fact the state's now put some more money, not an enormous amount, but some more money into pre-K. Talk a bit about the importance of that in this conversation.
Well, that is really important because a lot of kids arrive at kindergarten already behind. So we have to think creatively as far as how we can create more options and opportunities, especially for lower income residents and families to connect to pre-K. Now, our program is a model stellar program, but it can only serve a limited number of students. Right. So I've been interested in how we could collaborate with folks that are in the early education community on improving the quality, right, of early education at some of the child care centers throughout our city. I mean, if you look at a map of San Antonio and where the centers are that are NACE accredited, and that's National Association for the Education of Young Children, it's like that gold stamp of approval, they all tend to be in a certain part of town. And on the east side, for instance, which I used to represent and where we're focusing on that place-based development, there's only one NACE accredited center in the, right, area, and that's at a community college. Yeah. So that's another way that we can try and improve, and if they can't get NACE, they can get Texas Rising Star, which is a kind of a state.
Can you solve this problem on the backs of taxpayers in San Antonio? I mean, that's the question I have. It's admirable that the city decided to pull together and pass this, it was an 1/8 of a cent, is that right? Yes. 1/8 of a cent tax increase on the sales tax. At the end of the day, there's some question as to whether A, the state ought to be the one providing these dollars, and B, whether the state even wants you all passing tax increases. Local control now being a dirty word, right? So,
well, I think in the absence of the state doing anything, we can't just sit on our hands and let another generation of San Antonians go without the education that they need.
Right. Mr. Mayor, this was a part of your campaign. You talked a lot about the importance of early education for I think you talked about 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds very specifically. What have you done to advance that conversation since you've been mayor?
You know, we're starting to move ahead and starting to mobilize on that issue. There are some pay-for-success models that are being tested in this city with United Way and others that are trying to bring in funding with new funding models. There is money that's available and had been money available at the state level for 3-year-olds that we weren't drawing down. We're now beginning to draw down that money.
Right. Is there adequate money in the city's budget to meaningfully address this problem, or are you going to have to go to the taxpayers, as San Antonio did, or to the Capitol with your hands out? How are you going to fund the solution to this problem?
I think in many different ways as you can. It would be great if the state would send in more money. We need to access the money that they do have available that we haven't been. And I think that there are things that the city could be doing to support our independent school districts that we're not doing. Right now, under the rules and because of the funding measures that we have, our AISD sends back to the state $300 million coming up next year. It would be possible for the city of Austin to increase its tax rate by 1.8 pennies, which the last time I looked was the last measure of pennies that AISD was raising and then sending half of it back to the state. We could raise our tax rate by that amount. The school district could drop its tax rate by that amount. Our citizens could pay exactly the same amount.
So it would be a
taxes.
net nothing. It would be a wash.
Except that we would keep all the money here, and it would be another $10 million that would go a long way. And I think that as soon as we get through this budget season, that's one of the things that I'm talking to the school districts about.
If the city of San Antonio can go to its taxpayers and say, if you believe the importance of early childhood education, pay a little bit more in sales tax, why couldn't the city of Austin?
We don't have the 8th penny that we...
So you don't have the room to do it. There's no mechanism for you to do it.
No, we put all that money toward Capital Metro. So right now
how's that working
we don't
out
have
for
the
you?
Capacity. We are increasing buses and bus lanes, and you know, right now that is the way of the future for the city of Austin.
You are an optimistic and positive person. I'll give you that. Let me ask you a couple more quick questions, and then we'll open up to the audience. We continue to be the state with the most people who have no health insurance, both the percentage of our citizens and the raw number of our citizens. It's down from the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, despite the best efforts of the state of Texas to hold the ACA off. But it is still number one. We're still number one in the country among the states. Mayor Taylor, how is this inability to date to solve the health care problem and the uninsured problem in the state impacting your city?
Oh, of course it has an impact, because when people don't have access to health care, it impacts their productivity, their ability to get to work, to participate in the labor force, for their kids to be healthy and be in school. So it definitely has an overall impact. You know, we try to work at the community level, grassroots level, with organizations to encourage folks to take advantage of the Affordable Care Act, and we have several organizations that provide health care clinics and federally qualified clinics in San Antonio. So
but the problem is still a big problem in San Antonio.
Yes, it is
in a city the size of San Antonio, and also, although Bexar County actually has a slightly lower undocumented population than Travis County, the fact is the undocumented population is a large part of the uninsured population in places like Bexar County and Travis County, and so presumably this is not a problem that's going away anytime soon. Mr. Mayor, you too have been advocating for sign-ups, I know, in the time that you've been out among us, but it continues to be a problem here as it does elsewhere.
It's a problem. You know, we're doing our budget right now, and there's going to be money in our budget probably to help support those efforts, which is a shame, because the state ought to be encouraging the involvement a lot more than it is. But we're trying to do what it is that we can do. We're working a lot more efficiently in healthcare delivery in this city with Central Health. We're targeting people better. We're bringing coalitions of health providers together. There's one database so that anybody that intersects with the system can be identified and caught and services brought. So there's a lot of efficiencies we're working on.
My last question before we go to the audience. You both serve as nonpartisan mayors in your cities, but I believe you both self-identify as Democrats. Do you not, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Madam? Yes.
Okay. Cruz or Trump?
I'm enjoying both.
Are you? Will you endorse on the Democratic side in this race? Have you endorsed already?
I have not.
And I'm not aware of it. Will you endorse?
Just
do it now.
I don't know yet.
There's a camera right there.
Not yet.
What is keeping you from making a decision?
You know, I'm in a nonpartisan role, and right now my focus is on the city. And in the role that I'm in right now with this new council that I have, I'm reaching out to and communicating with large parts of the city that have real disparate views. And I'm enjoying that access
Will
right
you
now.
possibly stay out of it completely?
I don't know the answer.
Don't know. Mayor?
I will not endorse.
You will stay out of it?
I will stay out of it. Our previous mayor got involved on the national stage in partisan politics.
I've heard that.
Didn't sit well with many San Antonians, and we're at a time period where we really just want to focus on San Antonio issues.
Will you stay out of the general election, Mayor Taylor, as well?
I will vote.
No, I didn't mean you personally. Well, in San Antonio these days, that's actually news. That makes one of you. Will you endorse in a general election?
No.
So even if your former mayor, your predecessor, is on a national ticket, you would not endorse?
That is correct.
You know what the perception of that will be nationally. You don't care. Okay, good. Let's go to questions from the audience. I'm going to hand over. Am I going to hand over a microphone, John? These microphones kind of stink anyway, so I think you may have better luck just using your outside voice. So if you would raise your hand, we'll call on you, stand up and read the question, or offer your question. I will repeat the question for the benefit of our friends at home who are watching this on the live stream, and we'll stay as long as our time permits. Questions? In the very back. Sir.
Good morning, Adam. Good morning, Mayor. My name is Marco. I just wanted to ask Mayor Adler, can you update us on the status of the appraisal lawsuit? And then after you do that, Mayor Taylor, recently the Dallas Morning News endorsed what the city of Austin's doing. They're suing their appraisal district. And I was wondering what your views on that are and if you would be supportive of it.
Terrific. I did want to come back to that. I mentioned it earlier. Mayor, very quickly, tell us about the decision to sue the state over appraisals, and then we will ask the mayor if she intends to join in on this suit.
I think there's some question as to whether or not how we're valuing property in Travis County is fair. You know, the appraisal suit that we brought has nothing to do with raising additional tax revenue. It's purely a question of how is that tax revenue raised. And if commercial properties are being undervalued, if any class of property is being undervalued relative to other classes of property, then what's happening is not fair.
Do you worry that we're overvaluing, from an appraisal standpoint, residential properties?
You know, I haven't seen evidence that by and large we are overvaluing residential properties. I know that in my practice, my eminent domain field for 30 years, here mostly in Travis County, I'm representing landowners. In each one of those cases that I handle, the landowner goes out and hires an appraiser, the government goes out and hires an appraiser. In 90% of those cases, the independent appraisal that comes back from both appraisers values the market value of the property higher than what the ad valorem tax value is. In fact, you can't even use the ad valorem tax value in court as evidence of market value. That's a problem. And this lawsuit is just trying to raise that question, to say, is there something systemic in how we do property tax valuations that need to be corrected? And I think there are.
And you've asked for, as well, as part of this, price disclosure. Is that right? Disclosure of sale prices.
As most states do.
As most states have. There was an opportunity for the legislature to address the issue of commercial and industrial appraisals during the legislature. They didn't. I suspect that the lobby was probably pretty good on that issue.
They were, you know, but what happened is that a lot of people are afraid that if we disclose property values, it would end up being taxed. So for years, the big argument against disclosure was that taxation. What the legislature did was fix that problem. So in November, as part of the constitutional amendments we'll be voting, we'll be passing probably a constitutional amendment that says in Texas, we'll never tax the conveyance of real property. And with that, then the greatest objection to sales disclosure, I think, goes away.
Right. Mayor, the questioner is correct. The folks up in Dallas spoke favorably of Mayor Adler's efforts to sue the state over appraisals. Will you join?
We haven't discussed that with our city council, so at this point that's not an option that we're looking to pursue, but we are having some pretty intense conversations with the appraiser and trying to have a better understanding of what to expect in the future.
Seeing some of the same issues that the mayor is talking about. Other questions? Sir.
My name is James Parsons. If I gave each of you two mayors $100 million each, and you were allowed to spend it with any way you like.
No strings.
No strings in regards to your cities, how would you spend it?
Excellent question. Since it's all fantasy, this could be really awesome choices. I love this. Okay, Mayor Taylor, you have $100 million. Go.
Wow, that's a great scenario. Well, my focus has been on workforce development, so I wouldn't just provide scholarships for people to attend community colleges, but provide wraparound services and support to ensure that they complete whatever training they start so that they can then be productive.
Mr. Mayor, $100 million.
I was going to say job training in the same way. It would either be that $100 million as the seed capital to leverage the financing to be able to buy up that affordable housing stock and preserve it. But it would be one of those two things.
Good. Sir, and then I'll come over here.
My question is regarding the refugee crisis coming out of the Middle East. And I'm asking because I'm clueless, but I'm wondering if there's anything that Austin or San Antonio is doing to aid those refugees, and if there's anything that citizens can do to help with that effort.
Mr. Mayor.
You know, I don't know anything in particular about that, the immediate refugee influx associated with that, but I do know that this city has a lot of programs that deal with and support what is a very growing population of refugees in the city of Austin. Programs to aid with assimilation, job obtainment, housing, support groups. There's a lot we do for the growing refugee population, and there are lots of opportunities for people to help if that's their interest.
Mayor?
Yes, I can't speak specifically to the situation that you're describing, but similarly in San Antonio we have many grassroots, nonprofits, and faith-based organizations that assist in those types of scenarios, and the city usually provides funding or partnership with those organizations.
Ma'am.
Hi. Tony Rayner here in Austin. Thank you for being here. This is great. Mayor Adler, I have really appreciated what you've done in 8 months. It's awesome. When it comes down to transportation, I would support regional rail, okay, commuter rail. I don't support it in the city of Austin unless it's off of the surface. I'd like a monorail or something, you know, but the surface rail, even what we've got, does interfere with surface traffic, and that's been a problem for me. I would rather keep the buses so that it's flexible as needs change.
Question.
Sorry, yeah, I'm sorry, I just kind of needed to get that.
Well, let me rephrase your statement in the form of a question. Do we have a problem with rail lines taking up needed surface area? Are you going to create problems in the spirit of solving them, Mr. Mayor?
You know, I think that there's a lot of validity to that, and I think that's one of the reasons why this last bond election didn't pass.
Right.
And technologies are changing. I think that the future is dedicated lanes or dedicated pathways, so that whatever mode it is, whether it's buses or trains or bikes or whatever it is, has an independent pathway that's separate from cars. So I see us moving in that direction.
So we're not going to get a monorail?
You know, we say that, but you know, there are plans to do potentially something like that at the University of Texas. I was in a self-guided car at the airport at Heathrow that Ben Barnes and others are threatening to bring to our city.
Nobody driving?
Nobody. It was computer driven, and this was a little bit different than the Google car. The technologies that are happening right today are just incredible.
Okay. Ma'am?
Hi, I'm Nicole and I'm a volunteer with Nonprofit Action. And I appreciated your comments on open carry. And I guess my comment/question is, are you going to do more as mayors to make an impact on gun violence? We do have 30,000 gun deaths a year in this country, and about eight children and teens every day. And specifically, there's a coalition of mayors against illegal guns, which I'm sure you're familiar with, that really like to ask and encourage you to join that group.
What can you do in the era of open carry to prevent gun violence, Madam Mayor?
Thank you so much for your question. The emphasis that I've had in San Antonio kind of goes back to some of the things I talked about, community development and workforce development, those types of things. So we've been focused on eliminating and reducing street violence and gang involvement through intervention with at-risk youth. And so we've signed on to President Obama's My Brother's Keepers program, and we also have Stand Up SA. So those are our efforts, and I've recently talked with one of the Stand Up SA gentlemen, and they are actually going out on the street, talking to people one-on-one and de-escalating situations. So that is the approach that we're taking in San Antonio.
Mayor? You
I
mentioned
think
mental health work.
And I think that really is what, given the incidents that we're seeing, I think
Right.
it's that mental health infrastructure that would be most
And that's
beneficial.
actually, much of the gun issue is actually not bipartisan at the moment, but the mental health piece of it does seem to be an opportunity for people who disagree on most other aspects of it to come together. Ma'am?
Hi, I'm Patty. My question has to do with garbage and water.
Well, we're going to get down into weeds after all, aren't we? All right.
As our cities continue to grow, what effort are y'all making in your own cities to decrease and manage the amount of garbage that is piled up and where it's going to be going? And what efforts are you making to conserve water? Because although we've had some rain this spring, that's not always the case. And we seem to have more people drinking more water and using it.
Well, let's go to the second part first, because actually there is a great story out of San Antonio. Conservation has made a material impact in San Antonio.
Yeah, San Antonio leads the nation in water conservation. And even though we've had tremendous growth in our population. In the last 25 years, we have not increased water usage. So I think there's definitely a great story there, and we remain committed to our conservation efforts, even as we try to expand our water supply. On the garbage issue, we're trying to step up our game on recycling. For the residential users, where the city collects the trash, we, a few years back, moved to kind of 2 carts, and now where we have a recycling cart, and now we also have an organics program, and we're trying to decrease the amount of material that actually goes into the landfill and focus more on recycling, and then also partner more with the commercial institutions in encouraging them to recycle as well.
Mr. Mayor, this is a true fact. 4 trillion gallons of water fell on the state of Texas in the month of May. And the drought conditions in the state briefly went down to 0%. 0% suddenly of the state was in drought. Now we're back up about 23%, according to the Water Development Board. This big crisis is not over, right? San Antonio's had great success at conservation. What are you doing to solve this problem for us?
We've had similar success in Austin. Water usage has gone down substantially, which is one of the reasons why, even as our lake levels were dropping to precarious levels, we were still drinking water. And we need to continue those. Even though the lakes have filled up, I still support the continuation of the stage 2 controls that the city is under. In fact, I would like to see us have ever increasing amounts of xeriscape. It's the grass lawns that are going into homes that have as big an impact right now on water usage as anything else. But we're increasing water reuse in the city. And then with respect to resource recovery, the City of Austin has a zero waste goal, and we're a national leader in terms of that progress.
Have you picked up her garbage yet?
I hope so.
Okay. Anything you want to say about garbage and composting and what have you?
It's happening more and more. We have pilot programs that are going to be expanded, and I participate in composting even living here downtown now. The opportunity is available to do that.
Good. I'm going to call it there. We're just about out of time. Let's let everybody get back to their lives this morning. We are so fortunate to have had Mayor Adler and Mayor Taylor, especially Mayor Taylor, coming up the highway for us. Please give them a big hand. Thank you all very much for coming. Appreciate it.